Hello everyone, as you saw in the intro, today we're creating this popping corn animation inside of geometry nodes, and there are no simulation used for that. So let's get started. First, I deleted everything, so I'm gonna start modeling the corn by adding a simple cube here. Bring that up a little bit, and alt Z to go into the extra mode and bring these vertices up, and Control R to give it some loop cuts. Then I'm gonna scale these. Scale this one down a little bit. That's good. I'm gonna get out of the edit mode and hit Ctrl 3 to add 3 levels of subdivisions here and just apply that. Now after modeling that, only one thing we need is a popcorn mesh, which I'll leave a link in the description so you can download it. This is it right here. So for that, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna duplicate this mesh and grab it right here. So for this process, we need two forms of this mesh. One will be the popped one and the second one will be not popped. So we need to model it from this geometry, because if we change the geometry just a little bit, the whole morphing effect will not work. So you cannot add any more vertices or subdivisions or any loop cuts in there. It needs to be exactly the same as this one, but the shape can be changed. Like the vertices are same here. I can just change the shape of it to whatever I want, but it's still like this one, and it can be morphed back to this one. Hope this makes sense. Let's just start making it. So first, let's just add a cast modifier. In the factor, I'm gonna make it something like 1, I guess. You can see if I bring that down, it turns into that mesh again. But we will apply this modifier. We're not keeping it that way, so I'm gonna turn off this cast modifier and go to the scope mode and bring up the radius a little bit with F and select this smooth brush and just smooth that out a little bit so that it will be easy to cast and it will turn into a sphere easily. And a sphere shape is more like a corn. We can just play with it a little bit more and it will be the corn. I'm gonna go back to the object mode and let's turn back on our cast modifier. Let's see what that does. And now you can see our sphere is a lot more smoother. Still not very perfect, but I'd say it looks better than the first one. Let's just go back to the scope mode and see what else we can do here. I go back to the object mode and see how that looks like. Now we only got this a little bit of issue, but this won't matter because yeah, we can just bring that back a little bit to something like 0.99 or 1. Now I'm just gonna apply this cast modifier here. We have two versions of the same mesh because the vertices are the same. We can always morph this again to this mesh, and it's very easy now. But how we're gonna do this? We're gonna instance some of these things on this mesh here. So let's just do that first in the geometry nodes. Now select this mesh. I'm gonna rename it to the corn. This one can be our popped one. This one can be not popped. I don't know what it's called. So now let's just select that and create a new geometry nodes tree. I'll rename it to the popping corn. And here, first what I'll do is I will add a merge by distance node. Just merge that up a little bit and add an instance on points node. And I'll instance this the not popped one. Actually, just name it to something like sphere because it looks like sphere right now. And I'm gonna select that and connect the geometry to the instance. Actually, I'm gonna go to the edit mode and hit Alt S to just bring the radius down a little bit, just like that. Now that looks much better. And bring the distance of the merge by distance up a little bit. So you get this kind of effect here. I'm gonna turn off the geometry nodes modifier and go to the edit mode. And I'll randomize these vertices a little bit because they are very uniform here. So select everything, go to mesh, transform and randomize. Now bring the amount down a little bit and play with these values until you get something better. I'm gonna bring down the amount to something like 0.4 here. I'm gonna select some vertices right there, rotate them along the z-axis just slightly. Select some here, Just give it some randomness here and there, just like that. Rotate these two, and there we got some random stuff here. Now turn back on the geometry nodes modifier and you'll see it looks very good. Hit tab into the edit mode and select everything and scale it up a little bit. I'm gonna bring down the distance of the merge by distance a little bit more, and yep, that looks very good. After that, what we will do is we will instance this one over here on top of these, and then we will transfer the position attribute from this to this one. So you'll understand what I'm talking about in a minute. I'm gonna add a set position node here, because we're setting the position of these points to these back again. This kind of morphing effect in here. In the rotation, I'm going to add an align YOLO to vector node. I'll make this from X to Z, and the vector can be our normal. And that's good to go. I'm going to hide these nodes, so I'm gonna hide this one too, just bring it here. I'm gonna instance these popped ones here. First, what I'll do is just duplicate all of these nodes, Shift D. Actually, I may just frame this one with Control J, and this one too, Control J. Now in this object, I'm gonna select this popped object here, connect the merge by distance to the points. Now after adding all this, I'm just gonna add a realize instances node to convert all of these instances to real geometry, because they're just points still, and we instance these stuff on these points. So to convert that to geometry, I added a realized instances node, and I'll duplicate this node here and connect it here. After that, I'm going to add a transfer attribute node and connect the geometry to the source, and in the float I'm going to make it vector and index. In the attribute, I'll add a position node. Now I'll connect that straight to the position here, and then I'll add a mix RGB node to sort of get a transition between this one and this one. So then we can give this factor many more inputs here. So now get the same position here and connect it to the color too. Now when the factor is 1, it's gonna look like that, and if the factor is 0, it will look like this one. So now that we made the transition, we don't want them all to pop, because yeah, it will look very uniform and boring. So for that, what I'll do is in the selection, I'm going to add a random value node, and I'm going to bring down the probability to something like that. So now that we've lost all the points and also the mesh of the corn, this mesh, so for that, what I'll do is I'll add a join geometry node, super easy stuff, and connect the group input right there to the geometry. And we got this one. Then I'll duplicate all of these nodes from here and bring them up just like that, and connect the geometry to the points and the instance to the join geometry right there. So we got back our geometry from here, but we're doing a mistake here, because we merged everything by distance right there, and we need to connect this one right here, not this one, and this one too. Disconnect it from the group input and run it through a merge by distance, and then finally to the join geometry. Now right here in the selection, I'll get the same random value node and connect it to the selection here. But this random value is deleting the wrong ones, so I'm gonna get the opposite of this by adding this boolean math node in between and set it to not. Now it's deleting all the instances that were already added here in this node, and it's keeping the instances that were deleted in this one. So if we preview this, it looks like that. You can see these blank spaces, these are already gotten by this one right here. You can always bring up the probability value here and get more of these instances from that. Actually, I'm gonna just merge it by distance a little bit more to something like 0.271, and it looks much better. I'm gonna preview that. So now we need a controller for that. For this factor, we'll just use some proximity, because I don't want to confuse you with this other complex stuff. So for that, we'll just use a proximity, and for the proximity, I'm going to add a cube right here. Bring this cube up and scale it up a little bit and apply the scale. Go to the edit mode and hit 3 and delete the upper and the down face and delete faces. And I'm just gonna scale that up along the z-axis just like that and apply the scale here. and bring it up over here. In the object properties, I'm going to go to the viewport display and set it from display as texture to display as a wire. I'm going to rename this cube to the controller because we're going to be controlling the whole effect on that, and I'm going to import it to the geometry nodes and then set it to the relative. And in the geometry, I'm going to add a geometry proximity node and connect that to the target, and I will connect the distance here to the factor, and you can see it looks like that, and I'll add a map range in between there. So it looks very bad right now because we did the big mistake here. We didn't connect the random value here to this one. Yeah, so now it looks very good. If I bring that up, it's gonna transform to the, it's still not totally transforming, but because the to maximum value is a little bit upper, so we can play with these values. I can make that something like something bigger. And you can see this one is stretched a little bit. In fact, all of them are a little bit stretched because the origin is not in the center here. Right click and set origin of this to the geometry, and now it will no longer stretch. I'm going to set that to 1 or just 0.999. Now if we grab the cube, it's morphing like that. Make it something smoother, just like that. I'll set that to something like 0.75, and yep, that's good. And now if you grab the controller cube just like that, it's gonna turn these spheres into the popping things. Now what we will do is we will create some rotations based on this proximity. Some rotations and a little bit of displacement. After the merge by distance node, we'll add a set position node, and we will do a very simple displacement here. So in the offset, I'm just going to add a vector map, and I'll set that to the scale. Then I'm going to add another one here and set it to the multiply and connect it here. I'm going to multiply that with the normals again, and in this vector I'm going to add a noise texture. Connect that here. If we preview this, it looks like that. I will set the noise texture to 40 so that we can animate the W value here, and in there I'm just gonna add a scene time node and connect the seconds to the W slider here. Bring down the detail to 0 and bring down the scale a little bit. I'm gonna bring down the scale to something like 1.5, and in this scale I'm gonna bring it down so that it's not too much. I'll bring it down to something like 0.3 or 0.25, whatever you like. Now in here we want that only to appear where the proximity is, because it's on all of our mesh. We don't want it everywhere. So for this scale value, I will just use this proximity again. I'm just gonna select the first two, the object info and the proximity, and Ctrl G to group that and set the name of it to proximity, and just duplicate this node again here and connect it to the scale right there. Now if we move the cube that we made, it's gonna look like that. Very weird. Just gonna add a map range here. Now we are getting a little bit control over it, so we can see it's showing the effect where there is no proximity, and there's a very low effect where the proximity is. So I'm going to invert that. Set the 0 value to 1 and the 1 value to 0 right here. Just like that. This seems to be working, and the from maximum value should not be very too much. So let's just set the from maximum value to something like 0.5 here. And I'll select the controller cube and hit tab into the edit mode, select everything and hit Ctrl B because the corn is a very circular shape and we need circular shapes to control that. And now just like that, I'm gonna center it a little bit on there so that it works normally. And if I bring that up now, the effect looks like that, and it's coming outwards because we didn't add a subtract node here, because we need to subtract 0.5 up to the noise texture. So I'm just gonna select that and subtract 0.5 from there, and now you can see it looks very normal. I'm just gonna add a few loop cuts if that works for me. I'm gonna select the controller here and hit tab into the edit mode, and I'll hit S to scale it and Shift Z to remove the Z axis, and just scale it down a little bit so that it affects the geometry. Now if I bring it down, the displacement is gonna work totally fine, but the displacement is still too much, so I'm gonna bring down the to max value to something like zero point 0.3, and that looks very good. Now if I preview the set position node here, it's like rotating a little bit and looks like they're colliding with each other. And yeah, we got some movement here, and if I bring it up, there is no movement in these ones, and they're moving and a little bit rotating too. Now if we preview everything here, it looks like that. So what I'll do is after this one, before the realize instances, I'm going to add a set position node and just bring it up a little bit. So you can see the changes here. It's like going upwards, and that looks very good. Now as you can see, these the popped ones are really going inside the mesh. I'm going to displace it outwards a little bit. So right here in this one, I'll just move it right here. And in here, I'm going to add a set position node. In the offset, I can add a vector map, set it to scale, and in the vector, I can add normal. So you're scaling it along the normals, and I'm going to bring that down a little bit, just like that, not too much. And now it looks very good. If I bring that down, still doesn't look like the demo. Well, we can just do a little bit of more tweakings and it will be perfect. And why these are very little? Because our random value is very less probability here, because we want it fast viewport performance. You can always bring that up for the render, but for the viewport this value is very good. I think for the render I would do something like 0.5 or 0.6, because we don't need that much of these. It will just look very boring then. If we play the animation, these are just moving around a little bit. And so what I want here is when this controller moves, I want these to rotate a little bit, and it's like a little bit responsive way of dealing with this geometry, because we don't have any collision physics and stuff like that to make it realistic. So we have to fake it by some rotations and locations and stuff like that. Over here in the rotation, we have these nodes. After that, I'm going to add a vector math again, and I'll set that to add. I just deleted that frame from there. It was just annoying. I will add a math node here and set this to multiply. Then I'm going to add a random value and connect that to the multiply and connect that to the vector. In the random value, maximum value, I can make it something like 3. And the minimum will be 0.5. For this one, I'm going to add another math node here and set this one to multiply to. Then I'm going to add a map range and duplicate this map range and connect these over here, just like that. Then what I'll do is I'll duplicate my proximity group from there to right here and connect that over to the value from there to this value and this value. Now what I want is I want the rotation only in this area. Only in this area. But our proximity affects all of this area, and I want to cut a little bit of that from here and remove this area too and rotate these areas only. Let's just preview this multiply node first so that we can better understand and see what we're really doing. So I'm going to connect that to the black dot right here, and I'm going to go to the modifiers, select this mesh, and in this value you can see its value here. I'm gonna add any alphabet you want here. I can just add a T here, and in this plus button I'm gonna click that, then go to the shader editor. Make sure to give this a material first. So first what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add a set material node, and before this one over here, and select any material you want to give it here. So I'm gonna give it my material.001 and go to the shading, and here I selected the material from there. Now I can just type in this letter here, type in the T here, and Control Shift click to preview this. Now go to the shading tab and see what it looks like. Now I'm gonna just go to the geometry nodes and tweak these values to make it look better, because we want it in black in these areas and black over here too, and we want to make this area white. So let's just do that. We have to play with the map range. I'll bring that value up a little bit, and just like that, play with these. I think that would be enough for the rotation. So just look at these two map ranges. The values may be different for you. You want some result that just looks good to your eyes, and practice these settings and look at the viewport, how it looks like, and then change the values back so you will get some result that looks good in the final render. Just gonna disconnect this from here, go to the object preview mode, and then we'll just play it. Let's see how that looks like. You can see the rotation is working right here. It's rotating just like that, which is very cool. I can do a little bit more with that, this random value. Let's just make this to something like 2.5. Play with the random seed values here. Now go with that. I think that's pretty cool. It looks very good. So these are the nodes. This file will be uploaded on my Patreon, so you can download it from there and support me too for making these cool tutorials. And now if we preview everything together, it's gonna remove this wrap material node. If we preview everything, it looks like that. And we can hit the play button and bring that down. It's gonna pop like that. Now because we have a very less probability here, that's why it looks very boring right now. But if I bring the probability up a little bit to something like 0.55, then it's gonna look a lot better. Now if I bring the controller up or down, it looks like that. The knot is not connected to the selection, so I connected it back. Now if you preview that, you can see in this area it turns back into the sphere very seamlessly, in just like that. Now let me show you the rendered view of that. I'm just gonna hide this one for now. I did no shading here. It's just the ambient occlusion that's creating the illusion of the popcorn, and it's kind of yellow parts. I didn't really assign anything I didn't really texture it. It's just the ambient occlusion which is creating the yellow effect here, and it looks like popcorn. So first we have this mesh, which is obviously the popcorn. So I'm gonna just add set material node here before the join geometry and duplicate the set material to all these right there. Duplicate it to this one and then shift T to duplicate it right here too. Now go to this material tab, remove this one, is the old one. So hit new here, and first one is gonna be our popcorn. Then I'm gonna add another one, which is gonna be for the seed, and then I'm gonna add another one, and this one is gonna be for the body, the inner body. Now right here, as you can see, this one is the body because it's got no inputs right there. I'm gonna assign this to the body, and this one is our seed, and in this one, which is the popcorn, just gonna give it the popcorn material and preview everything. Now we go into the shading, and so in the popcorn, I'm just gonna add an ambient occlusion node, and then I'll just add a color ramp here and preview this. So it looks like that. I'm gonna bring these values back a little bit. Just added the ambient occlusion node, then I'm gonna add a map node here and set this to the greater than. And after that, I did a simple setup here. After the greater than, I add a color ramp. You can see the white value is on this side, and if we preview this, it looks like that. And then I added a next node here. The color one is this kind of yellow thing that the corn have, and the second one is white. Then I added a hue saturation node and set the hue to something like 0.52, and the saturation is 0.8, and the value is 2, so it's very bright. Then I connect the hue saturation to the base color and preview this. After this color ramp, I added another color ramp here, which looks like that. You can design that yourself from this one and connect that over here. Then I added a multiply node and multiplied it with the 0.2. So I'll connect this node to the metallic, and I'll connect the color ramp to the specular, and the roughness is 0. So these areas look very shiny and metallic kinda. Then in the popcorn material, if you go to the geometry nodes, after the set position node, we added the popcorn material. So all the geometry that's coming from the set position node will have the popcorn material. So if you preview this, we not only have the popcorn here, we also have this the seed here. So what I want to do is I want to create a gradient in between there so that we can give another material, another BSDF here for these ones, and give them just a simple shader, not the complex popcorn material. So for that, what I'll do is go to the shading tab first, and first I'll create the seed material right here. So over here we have a simple principle, the BSDF node. I'm gonna set the specular to something like 0.7. The roughness, bring it down. And here, so in the popcorn material, here we have a hue saturation node. So I'm just gonna copy this hue saturation node from the previous popcorn material and go to the seed material and paste it here. So you have the hue saturation with all these values. These values are correct. Don't play with them. I'm just gonna choose my color, a very yellowish color here. Connect that to the base color and connect that to the subsurface color. If we preview this, it's gonna look like that. And I'm gonna add a subsurface value up something like 0.044, but you can see we got these kind of spots right here and I don't like them. So how do we remove that? I can set this from random walk to this first one. I don't know how to pronounce this. It seems to be fixed now. Just copy these two nodes with Ctrl C and go to the popcorn material and paste them right here. Grab them there. Then we're gonna mix it with this one. Control Shift and right click drag on this one. It's gonna add a mix RGB node. And for the factor, we're gonna use some gradient because these ones should not be white. They should look like that. So let's just change the color of that. For that, I'm gonna add a gradient texture and hit Ctrl T to bring these texture coordinate and mapping node. Then in this object, I'm gonna select our controller and let's just preview this texture here. Then I'll just connect the object to the vector here. Now it looks like that. Then in the rotation, I'm gonna rotate it along the y-axis 90 degrees. So now it looks like that. Now in one of these axes, you can bring the location of this down. So play with these axes just like that, and that's it. We've created the gradient. Now connect the factor or the color to the factor here and preview this. You can see it's all one texture now. And these are the popcorn materials. You can also shade the body if you want to, but I don't think you'll need that because it's all hidden underneath the instances. Now what you can do is you can select all the objects that you don't want to show in the render and create a new collection for that. Trash, and just hide the collection. Now let's just animate this just a little bit. I'm going to set the end frame to something like 100. In the first frame, I'm going to insert a location keyframe and bring that up first. And I'm going to insert a location keyframe. And in the 100th frame, I'm going to bring this down. And also insert a location keyframe. And go back. And the report is gonna be very slow because we have a lot of instances and geometry right here. So the best way to preview your animations without just rendering everything for hours and hours, you can just go to the view and viewport render animation, and it's super fast and it will give you the results very soon. Just wait for it. It's faster than Eevee and Cycles. I hope you understand all the process because if you understand that, you can always change everything here. You can change the whole behavior of that and make it better than mine. Now, if you hit like Control F12 to preview this, it looks like that. Very cool, right? Now here I think the edges are very sharp. These edges are going really sharp, so I'm gonna go to the geometry nodes, select that, and in our gradient right here, where was that? Yeah, right here. I can bring the value of this one down a little bit to make this smoother, and just look at it, it's very smooth now. And as for the lighting, just go to the world tab and in this color select that and go to the sky texture. I like this one, and the strength can be something like 0.3. The sun intensity, bring it down. Sun elevation, bring this one down too, to just give it a little bit of yellow kind of look. And the sun rotation, rotate it a little bit and go to the render properties, and in the film make it transparent. You can always change the scale of these objects. Just go to the instance and scale that up to something like 1.2, and these are bigger now. In these instances, you can also randomize the rotation by just adding a random value here, and in the maximum bring it up This random value works with this, and these are the nodes. You can copy these from here, or just move that slowly. You can change the probability to something like 0.62, just like that, and change the seed to get random values here. Just add a camera in front of that, hit Control, Alt and numpad 0 to set the camera view right there, and hit G and ZZ to bring it back. Now I'm gonna set the focal length to something like 85. That's what I use all the time. Now just go to the render settings, render region, and then I'll render it as a JPEG because the PNG file sizes are very big. And we're not doing any big stuff here, just showing you the preview here. So you can render PNG because it's high quality. In the render settings, I'm gonna bring the maximum sample to something like 200, and denoiser is on. You can also turn on the motion blur if you want to. I'm gonna set the shutter to something like 0.35, and in the color management, make the look to high contrast. And in the compositing, we'll just use nodes, hit N, Control Shift click to add a viewer, and I'm just clicking Shift and right click and drag here to add this reroute. I'm gonna add a lens distortion, and in the dispersion I'm gonna make it something like 0.03. That's gonna be good. Let's just hit F12 to render a frame. Select the controller and turn off the render visibility, and now render a frame. Now if you do a little bit better lighting, environment and stuff like that, it will look much better. You can always play around with it and get your scene ready. And rotate the sun a little bit. Now we're getting somewhere. Render that one out. You can get all of these project files on my Patreon and also support this channel and these kind of tutorials. And that's enough for today. I'll see you in the next one.